And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you our Commander, Marine Forces Reserve, Lieutenant General John F. Kelly.
Thanks a lot, Tracy. I'll stay close to the podium, if for no other reason that the guy with the camera doesn't have to give himself vertigo chasing me around. Listen, I got to apologize first for the venue, for the location. I know you probably think this is an Air Force event, but it's not. We just couldn't get the Quonset huts up at 29 Palms to do a true Marine kind of event. So we had to bring you here to Atlanta, into a great hotel, and to do it right, frankly. Heroes and healthy families. As your commander, and I don't think any commander in the Marine Corps at least would argue with this, combat readiness is made up of a lot of different factors, one of which, in my estimation, is family readiness, as well as the readiness, spiritual readiness, if you will, and I don't mean necessarily church, but the spiritual resilience and ability of a Marine to handle combat, and just as importantly, to handle coming back to the United States. The purpose of this event, and I'll read it right off the paper, is to assist in understanding and addressing, that is to say, dealing with various challenges you, me, or those of whom that we know may face upon returning from a combat zone. We have a tremendous lineup today, and I won't go through each and every one of them, but I will tell you that Sergeant Major from R4 Res, from 4th MLG, Sergeant Major Booker, tremendous combat leader, tremendous combat Marine, will share some of his experiences. This guy knows, like most Sergeants Major and senior staff NCOs know. We'll also hear from a long, dear friend of mine, Blackjack Matthews, retired Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Marine Corps, a tremendous gunfighter of another generation, Vietnam, and he's got some very, very personal things to share with you that are very, very, very important. And we have many others, and again, don't want to get into them all. They'll come up and you will be impressed by their messages. One of the things I wanted to start with in terms of my opening is that I believe, at least in my time in the Marine Corps, from when I was standing on the yellow footprints at Parris Island, the real boot camp, by the way, when I was standing at Parris Island, South Carolina, a long, long time ago, until today, I believe that most of the issues in the Marine Corps, whether they're combat effectiveness, family readiness, or frankly, the terrible tragedies that are brought on by alcohol and drug abuse, brought on by domestic violence, brought on by depression. I think all of those, to a very large degree, begin and end with engaged leadership. And I believe, and I criticize the senior officers, perhaps, of the Marine Corps, that we've gotten away from that a little bit. There was a time in the Marine Corps where the sergeant and the corporal knew everything there was to know about the private, the PFC, and the Lance Corporal. And the staff sergeant knew everything there was to know about his people, sergeant and below. And the lieutenant knew the same thing about everyone in his platoon. And the company and his company commander. This was called engaged leadership. There was no such thing as downtime, personal time, off-duty time. There was no such thing as this is their space. Because as a family, we should be completely and totally involved in our lives. Sure, there's privacy issues that we need to recognize. But day in and day out, the thing that has made us different, effective on the battlefield, effective at home, and better than, in my estimation, the other services, with all due respect, is this concept of engaged leadership. And I think we've gotten away from that a little bit. You're going to hear today about and you already have heard an awful lot about various resources that are available to all of us. You know, we have Military One Source, absolutely superb point of departure to find almost anything you could possibly want to know or deal with. You have all the family centers at all the bases and stations around the country. And those of us that are reservists, most of us are reservists here, spread all around the country at Army, Navy, Air Force bases, as well as, of course, Marine bases, National Guard bases. So the family service centers are there for you as a resource. You got the Marine Corps Navy Relief Society that's always out there to help. You got the American Red Cross that provides all sorts of services. You got the Alcoholics Anonymous. You got the Salvation Army. You have all sorts of state, city, county, and even college, if you're in college, all sorts of hotlines and support structures. And they're all very, very, very good. But I got to tell you a story, and this is back on the Engaged Leadership. I saw a video or a CD of a wife of a drill instructor who committed suicide, her husband. He came back from Iraq, went to Parris Island, did very, very well in drill instructor school. You may have seen the CD. And she talks, a very brave woman, about the suicide of her husband. And she talks in it about over time how he changed and was drinking heavier, prescription drug abuse. And his whole life was just coming apart. But of course, he didn't want anyone in the Marine Corps to know because he was afraid for his career. And she went to the state of South Carolina for help. She went to Military One Source for help. She went and she described what she did to try to help and deal with this. And then, of course, he committed suicide. And the first time his sergeant major, his first sergeant, his captain company commander, and his battalion commander at Parris Island knew that he was having difficulty was when they were dealing with his suicide and his burial. It used to be, and should be in my estimation, that the first resource that a Marine or his wife goes to is the command, because they then can help us do almost anything we're trying to accomplish. And I know you hear a lot of times people don't want to go to the command because they get the stink of being a weak guy or a weak gal, or they don't want their career. That's crazy. We're a different Marine Corps relative to that today. But at the end of the day, I believe an engaged leader, if he had known, could have helped in this case. And I think there are many, many, many cases out there. It's one of the things we look at when there is a suicide or a serious spousal abuse, domestic abuse. We look to see what kind of activities or what kind of actions the command took if they knew. And again, we get the same thing. I called Military One Source, they sent me to this resource. I went down and talked to the state counselors, and they took me to another place. At the end of the day, it should begin, should end with the corporal, with the sergeant, lieutenant, captain, sergeant major. That's where the family, I think, should seek help first. We don't let our Marines down. One of the things that I am most proud after all of my years in the Marine Corps, one of the things I think that caused me to join the Marine Corps first was this legend, and it's true, that we don't leave Marines behind on the battlefield. I'll tell you a war story someone told me once in Iraq in 2004, where this patrol, a mounted patrol, got in one hell of an ambush. And a lot of people were hurt. At least one Marine was killed. And as part of the IED attack, two of the Marines in one of the vehicles didn't have their eye protection on. Again, they should have. Engaged leadership would have kicked them in the ass and had them put that on. But when the blast happened, they had all sorts of glass and whatnot in their eyes. And they were, of course, outside. The vehicle was on fire. Hell of a firefight, RPGs, machine guns, the whole bit. And all these two Marines who are now totally blind, although they've recovered, but at the time were totally blind. And you get to imagine their fear, because they can't even see what's going on, let alone help themselves. And all one of them kept saying was, "Don't leave me behind, don't leave me behind, don't leave me, take me with you, don't leave me behind." First of all, that Marine missed a lesson at boot camp and everything else about the Marine Corps. And he kept saying it over and over and over again until a pretty senior Marine officer grabbed him and said, "Look, we will all be dead first, but everyone comes out." And that included the one Marine that was killed, and his body was recovered. That's what the Marine Corps is all about. We would never leave a Marine or a Navy doc or a soldier serving with us or an Air Force person serving with us. We would never leave someone on the battlefield. A lot of us, a lot of you came back from the war, and this is a new kind of battlefield we're dealing with. A lot of them are back here dealing with demons. A lot of us are back here dealing with depression. This is a different kind of battlefield, but I think it extends back here as well. We don't leave Marines and soldier sailors and airmen that serve with us behind. And if we don't look to their well-being, I think it's the same thing as leaving them on the battlefield. I think maybe one more point, and then I'll get away. All of us that go to combat come back changed. I think, frankly, to a large degree, most of us have changed for the better. We have a different view of our country. We have a different view of our loved ones. We have a different view of what's important in life. And those are positive changes. But a lot of us come back with other types of changes as well. Some of us are guilty because we sent Marines out, didn't go with them, and they didn't come back. Corpsmen typically are upset because they couldn't save the life of the Marine they were working on. They've got some guilt there. Officers frequently have second thoughts or have depression in NCOs and staff NCOs because they constantly think, could I have done that better? Was the assault the right thing to do? And frankly, a lot of individual Marines just have a lot of guilt because on a given day, they couldn't get up and do the squad rush. So they come back with those things. These kind of things stay with you the rest of your lives. The role of what we're trying to do here with you is to energize you all, to educate you all, to make you all aware that when you go back to your units, when you go back to wherever you're from, that when you see a Marine, soldier, sailor, it doesn't matter, airman, when you see one having trouble, drinking more than he ought to, using drugs, going into depression, getting withdrawn, something may be wrong. Not always, but something may be wrong. And what you need to do is put your arm around, engage the leader, put your arm around that Marine or soldier, sailor, airman, and say, hey, what's going on? Let me get you someone that can help. Let's go talk to the first sergeant. That's the kind of thing we want you all to understand. This is life and death stuff. We don't leave Marines and those who serve with us on the battlefield. We would never do that. Those of you that have served in combat, which most of you have, what's the first kind of aid we give on the battlefield? Someone gets hit. Self-aid, right? Right? What's the second kind of aid? Buddy aid. And the docs will tell you that 95% of the lives that are saved, and I go to Bethesda weekly hundreds of times, to Brooke Army, Balboa in California, Walter Reed, all the docs will tell you every 95% of the lives are saved, not by the corpsman, not by the doctor, certainly not by the hospital. 95% of the lives saved are saved by buddies that know what to do and they render the aid to save that Marine's life, whether it's a tourniquet, whether it's direct pressure, whatever. And that's what we're after here. We can save the lives, and not just in terms of the physical life of suicide. We can save the lives of Marines. We can save them from falling into depression or help them out of their depression. We can assist them if they're going into substance abuse by buddy aid. 95% of the lives saved in Iraq and Afghanistan are saved by us, not the medical people. I believe if we do it right, and that's what we're trying to do here, we can save 95% of our brothers and sisters who will be affected in a negative way. I think we can do that. So that's what this is all about. And I will just render one more time an apology. We couldn't get the Quonset huts up at 29 Palms, so we had to bring you here. And Semper Fidelis.